All right, everybody, it's Mr. Hohen with the final third of 3 videos that relate to the 27 questions that have to be answered that is covering the unit Introduction to the Race class. In this final video, we'll be covering questions 21 through 27. Let's begin with 21. 21 is going to require you to pause the tape and answer the question that's up here as well as on your worksheet. Give me your personal definition for what you think racism is. Pause the tape, come right back after you're done. All right, so let's get a universal understanding of what racism is. The dictionary defines racism as a belief that all members of a race possess characteristics or abilities specific to that race so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race. In other words, if you believe your race is better than someone else's race in any way, shape, or form, that makes you racist. Now, there is a second definition for racism that I want you to think about. This one comes by way of Revise Sociology, which is that same organization that defined race earlier from the first video in the first couple questions. Their definition of racism is that racism equals race prejudice plus power. It's sort of a mathematical definition, and it's much simpler than the dictionary definition. But what I want you to do is pause the tape and answer question 22 as it relates to comparing and contrasting these two definitions. So pause the tape, answer question 22, and come right back. All right, so now we have to get a couple of things out of the way. Once again, to establish a foundation of what race and racism is. Racism is learned behavior. No one's born racist. You learn it, and that's typically from a family upbringing, and it's also later reinforced through media and other institutions like education, for example. As I said, no one is born racist. No one comes out of their mom's belly on day one racist. Racism is learned behavior, and anything that can be learned can be unlearned. And what I mean by that has to do with sort of a personal story. So I was raised in a pretty racist household. It was not uncommon for my mother particularly to speak very negatively about black people, and even using the N-word. My grandmother would use that word. So no surprise, I grew up in a household where racist thinking and behavior was sort of normalized. So of course I would grow up later to be somewhat racist. And it wasn't until my later teen years where I was able to sort of see the flaw in that and sort of develop my own independent way of thinking about race. So that's important that everyone understands that before we go much further. The next thing I want you to do is to fill in the box, these empty boxes that are part of question 23. I wanted you to break down by percentages what you think the percentage is of white, black, Hispanic, Asian, and other within the United States. And other would cover sort of smaller populations of people, like, for example, Hawaiian or Turkish, or groups that don't necessarily easily fit into those other four groups. All right. So based on what you think the breakdown by percentages of the population for the United States, Connecticut, and for Bridgeport, put in numbers. Make sure that those numbers on a row basis equal 100. And, I'm going to ask you to pause the tape and to do that right now. And then when you're done, come back. All right, so here are the actual numbers, which are based on the U.S. Census numbers that were taken back in 2017. these are the numbers of what the United States looks like today by sort of racial breakdown, racial and ethnic background. This is also going to require you to pause the tape and answer question 24, which is going to ask you to sort of reflect on what you predicted and what the actual breakdown is. So pause the tape now, answer question 24, and come back when you're done. All right, so we're coming up to the end here, and this last part of the introduction is going to ask you to take an online test to determine your bias towards either the white race or the black race. Let me read this, and then it is going to require you to answer a question before you take the test. So hold on. You're about to take an online test to determine if you are biased to one race over another race. Before you take the test, write a response to the following question. This is question 25, and I'll ask you to pause the tape in a second. Be really honest with yourself. Are you biased towards any particular race, including your own race? Explain your answer as completely and as honestly as possible. Include any important background information about how you were raised in regards to racial bias. Your personal info will be kept personal. All right, so pause the tape and answer question number 25, and then come back. Hold on a second. All right. Just a little of information before you take the test to make sure you understand what you're about to get yourself into. This test is called the IAT test, and it was created by Harvard University in 1998, and is one of the most famous psychological instruments created in recent history, covering multiple social categories, including race. This particular test requires the ability to distinguish faces of European and African origin. In this study, you will complete an implicit association test in which you will be asked to sort pictures and words into groups as fast as you can. In addition to the IAT, there are some questions about your beliefs, attitudes, and opinions, and some standard demographic questions. This study should take about 10 minutes to complete. At the end, you will receive your IAT result along with information about what it all means. All right, so the website is right here. There is also a link for that on your worksheet. Please take that test right now, pause the tape now, take the test, and then come back. All right, so now that you've been given your results of the test, it's time to answer 4 questions that are part of question 26. So I'm going to ask you to pause the tape one more time and answer as best you can and honestly as you can those 4 questions that are part of question 26. Pause the tape now and then come back after you're done. All right, so now this is it. This is the end of the introduction on race. And then we're going to be diving a little bit more deeply in our next unit into black racism, specifically as it results to historical slavery and the period of history that follows slavery. So to wrap things up for this introduction, I need you to write 2 substantive answers to the 2 following questions that are on your worksheet as number 27. What are your 2 big takeaway learnings from this introductory unit? Write a thoughtful, complete response of at least 5 sentences. I've thrown a lot of information at you over the course of these 3 videos in this introductory unit, and I'm asking you to sort of take 2 of the biggest lessons you've learned from this introductory unit and write about them. Second, identify at least 3 questions you have about the content you've learned about so far, or questions about what you hope to learn in the coming weeks. As I told you in the beginning here, sometimes it's more important to raise questions than to find answers for those questions. And so that's why I'm asking you to identify at least 3 questions here about what you've learned and what you hope to learn over the coming weeks. That's it. Thanks, and stay tuned for more content to be delivered by way of YouTube and me on the Perspectives of Race class.